Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 4, Text 29. Daksha offering the Hamsaguya prayers at the lotus feet of the Lord. And this is the 1975 first edition, Srimad Bhagavatam, translated with commentaries by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. The text is available for a free download from the website krishnapath.org. So this is text 29. The Daksha is offering these prayers to the Lord that he might get the Lord's blessings and the special mercy of the Lord, that he can perform his service, which is to populate the universe. And that's his service. He's one of the Prajapatis. And up to this point, he's been meditating on the service, but it wasn't going as well as he would have liked. He just didn't feel that it was going the way it should. So he's undergoing some austerities, and he's offering these prayers, the Hamsaguya prayers. He didn't make these prayers up. These are prayers that are available in the Vedas. And the Lord is pleased by Daksha's offering these prayers. So text 29, Daksha continues. Anything expressed by material vibrations, anything ascertained by material intelligence, anything experienced by the material senses or concocted within the material mind, is but an effect of the modes of material nature, and therefore has nothing to do with the real nature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Supreme Lord is beyond the creation of this material world, for he is the source of the material qualities and creation. As the cause of all causes, he exists before the creation and after the creation. I wish to offer my respectful obeisances unto him. The last several verses of these prayers have been delineating how the spiritual energy is there. It's simply covered by the material energy. So this is a further explanation how anything expressed by material vibrations, ascertained by material intelligence, experienced by material senses, or concocted within the material mind, is but an effect of the modes of material nature and has nothing to do with the real nature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the Lord can't be known through material vibrations, with material intelligence. He can't be perceived through material senses, and he can't be understood with the material mind. Why? Because they are under the jurisdiction of the three modes of material nature, and the Lord is beyond the three modes of material nature. Up until the invention or the discovery of the electron microscope, the persons, scientists who were very interested in studying the electrons, which are smaller than atoms and molecules, were very bewildered how they could get information by perception, sense perception, of electrons, when they're smaller than the basic building blocks of the molecules and the atoms. So how could a microscope made up of molecules and atoms, no matter how great the magnification, would not be able to perceive the electrons. Why? Because it's made up of electrons. And the electrons are making up the molecules and the atoms. Anyway, this is the way scientists try to talk about these things, these energies. And it wasn't until they found a whole nother different way to perceive electrons by studying the effects of their motions, by studying the effects of their activities. Then they could understand the presence of the molecules, of the electrons. So in one sense, that's the way it is with the spiritual energy. To try to perceive the spiritual energy with the material senses, material mind, or material elements is like trying to use a microscope made of molecules and atoms to try to see something which is finer than that which it is made up of. So the spiritual energy is finer than the material energy, and so it cannot be perceived either grossly or subtly. Not that it isn't there. The effects of the spiritual energy can be perceived. One time, and it's many moons ago, and I was searching. Who knows the truth? Who knows the answers? Somebody has to know something about what's going on here. Everybody can't be in complete ignorance. Somebody has to know something. I'm going to find out. It was quite young. And I wandered into a church service, and it was in a mental institution, church service in a mental institution. The preacher was giving the service for the patients and whoever else wanted to come, any of the staff. It's open to everyone. His motive was to glorify God and illuminate the path of salvation. And he gave a very, very good example. It made a big impression on me. How we can perceive the presence of God, supreme spiritual being, what we say, Krishna. And the example he gave was, it was a spring day, and he pointed outside through the window that just like if we see these birds hopping around on the ground, it was a spring day, and they're pecking at the ground, we know what they're doing. They're finding food there. That's why they're pecking at the ground, because there's food there and they're finding food. We can't see, at least not from this position, this angle of vision, what exactly they're eating, or we can't really even see that they're eating something. All we can see is the pecking. But we know from that they're finding food there. So we can understand about the Lord in a similar way. We can't perceive him directly, but we can see the effects of his presence. We can perceive his presence. And the way to do that, to perceive the Lord, is through devotional service. By engaging in devotional service, the Lord is revealed. As long as there's the exploitive mentality and the competitive mentality, then we're not able to perceive, because we're looking out, we're perceiving out through a kind of lens or filter. And this filter has three aspects to it. It has the aspect of ignorance, the aspect of passion, and the aspect of goodness. It's like a filter that covers our vision, covers our perception. When we have this exploitive mentality, we want to consume and exploit, and we're in competition with the Supreme Being. We want to be as good as God. We don't want to enter into his jurisdiction, into his pleasure potency, into his spiritual dominance. We don't want to recognize his dominance. We don't want to recognize his superiority. So we become covered, our perception becomes covered by this filter which has three aspects to it: goodness, passion, and ignorance. It's the three modes of material nature. So the Lord can't be perceived as long as we're covered with this filter of the three modes of material nature and are not taking shelter of devotional service. The Supreme Lord is beyond the creation of the material world, for he is the source of material qualities and creation. As the cause of all causes, he exists before the creation and after the creation. I wish to offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Daksha is glorifying the position of the Supreme Lord, and how he has nothing to do with the material nature in the sense of being under its jurisdiction. Material nature is an emanation from him. He's not covered by it like the sunshine and the cloud. If in a cloudy day, our vision may be blocked by the cloud, but the cloud has really no effect on the sun. It's just from our angle of vision, there is this cloud has come. The water has evaporated from the ocean and making this cloud. But we can hear about the sun, and eventually the cloud passes. Prabhupada's commentary. One who manufactures names, forms, qualities, or paraphernalia pertaining to the Supreme Personality of Godhead cannot understand him, since he's beyond creation. Well, there you go. He's beyond the creation, so someone who tries to understand the absolute truth by creating some form or activity or personality, whatever, tries to concoct something about who this force is or what this force is that's beyond the creation, they can't do it because it's beyond the creation. And the activities of the mind like that are an activity of creation within the material modes of nature. And still people try. It's a mental speculation. Still they try. The Supreme Lord is the creator of everything. This means he existed when there was no creation. In other words, his name, form, and qualities are not materially created entities. They're transcendental always. They don't have a beginning. They don't have an end, his activities. He isn't born. He doesn't die. He doesn't get sick. He doesn't get old. It's not part of the material creation, which has all those things. The pastimes of the Lord are always beyond the material creation. One way to think about it and perceive it, how this is like the sun going through the sky. It's always noontime somewhere. Just because it's nighttime, say it's nighttime where I am on the planet, doesn't mean noon doesn't exist anymore. Noontime is present in another part of the planet as the sun is moving. So Krishna's pastimes are like that. Sometimes they're manifest in one part of the universe, sometimes they're manifest in another part of the universe, but he's beyond the material creation, so they're always existing. Like the sun is always shining brightly. Just because it's dark here doesn't mean the sun isn't shining. So Krishna's pastimes and Krishna, personality of Godhead, is like that. He's eternally present. He's eternally manifested. He's not created. This has no beginning, no end. And for those of us who are so accustomed to identifying with the material creation, we really can't even conceive of that there is anything beyond this material creation. But there is. There's a creator who's not subject to creation and dissolution, who's always existing. Therefore, by our material concoctions, vibrations, and thoughts, we cannot ascertain the Supreme Lord. This is explained in the verse, Atak Shri Krishna Namadi, Nabhavet Krayam Indiyai. So then, sometimes the question arises, well, if the absolute truth, the so-called personality of Godhead, is beyond material senses, everything material, then how is it possible to even talk about him? You're using material words. This is the super excellence of devotional service. Is there a transformation takes place in connection with devotional service, glorifying the Lord and hearing from the realized souls, the pure devotees, the transcendentalists, then everything can be used in devotional service and it becomes spiritualized. Prabhupada would talk about the iron rod placed in the fire. When it's engaged in the fire, it becomes, after a while, red hot, and then it acts like fire. So material energy, material senses, material mind, material intelligence, money, buildings, cars, telephones, everything, computers, internets, when used, engaged in devotional activities for the pleasure of the Lord, become transformed. They become spiritualized, like the iron rod is iron, it's dull metal, but when it's in the fire, it becomes red hot. And that's by the potency of devotional service. And Krishna says, instructs in the Bhagavad Gita, Patram pushpam palam tvayam yome bhakta prayachati. If one offers me with love and devotion fruit, flower, leaf, or water, I'll accept. It's because of that element of love and devotion, desire, not for satisfying one's own sense gratification, but desire for satisfying Krishna. And Krishna accepts that service. And then the activities are taking place on a whole nother platform of activity, a spiritual platform. This is confirmed by the Lord himself in the Bhagavad Gita. Avajananti mamudha manusim tanamasritam parambhavam ajananto mama bhuta maheshwaram. Translation: Fools deride me when I descend in the human form. They do not know my transcendental nature, my supreme dominion over all that be. End translation. Krishna can appear in any form. It can appear in sound, his holy name, Krishna, Krishna. That's Krishna, right there. There's Krishna, the holy name of the Lord, Krishna. Or Krishna can appear as the deity, the Archa Vigraha, the Archa Murti, and accept service under rules and regulations. That's Krishna. And Krishna can appear in a human form. Why not? He can appear in sound. He can appear in stone and wood. Why not appear in flesh and blood? He can take on that form. But he's not flesh and blood. He's not stone and wood. And he's not materially. He's not those things. Those become completely spiritualized by the presence of the Lord. They're not material. He can take that form to engage in activities and so that he can be perceived. He takes the form of stone or wood as the deity in the temple so that we can perceive him, because we can't perceive anything else except the gross material elements. We're covered over. So he appears in that form to accept our service. And he appeared as a sannyasi, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who was non-different from Jagannath in the temple, the deity in the temple. Lord Jagannath is Krishna. Lord Chaitanya is Krishna. But for introducing the Harinam Sankirtan, he's appearing as Lord Chaitanya. And he appears as the spiritual master also. Spiritual master is the external manifestation of Krishna. Spiritual master's body, the pure devotee's body, is not material. Completely engaged, 100% in devotional service, is actually a spiritual body. This is the super excellence of devotional service. So, fools deride me when I descend in the human form. They do not know my transcendental nature, my supreme dominion over all that be. End translation. Therefore, one must receive knowledge from a person to whom the Lord has revealed himself. There's no value in creating an imaginary name or form for the Lord. Sripad Shankaracharya was an impersonalist, but nevertheless he said, Narayana paro vyaktat. Narayana, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is not a person of this material world. We cannot assign Narayana a material designation, as the foolish attempt to do so when they speak of Daridra Narayan, poor Narayan. You know, how insulting, really. Daridra Narayan. It's Lakshmi Narayan. It's not Daridra Narayan. This was an attempt several years ago in India to bring about respect for the poor people and to try to have others be inspired to help them, serve them, because they're Narayan, they're just poor Narayan. Daridra Narayan. But Prabhupada's explaining that is a concoction. There is no Daridra Narayan. The two words do not go together. It's offensive. It's Lakshmi Narayan. Narayan is always transcendental, beyond this material creation. How can he become Daridra Narayan? Poverty is found within this material world, but in the spiritual world, there's no such thing as poverty. Therefore, the idea of Daridra Narayan is merely a concoction. It's very confusing, really not at all understanding or having any realization of the actual position of the Lord. Where Prabhupada is explaining here, there is no poverty, there's no such thing. Poverty is a phenomena of the material world. There's no shortages or scarcities of anything in the spiritual world. It's a totally opulent place. Totally, all opulences are there. And Krishna is the supreme opulent, surrounded by all types of servants and devotees, sages and saints. They're very opulent. There's nothing missing in the spiritual world. Except maybe for us, we're missing. The lost but not forgotten. Krishna is appearing to take us home, even if it's kicking and screaming. He's come in his most merciful form of Lord Chaitanya, benedict the world, whether they want it or not. Getting the holy name, getting Krishna Prasadam, the message of Godhead, is the mission of Lord Chaitanya. Making it available. Not forcing anyone, but making it available. Daksha very carefully points out that material designations cannot be names of the worshipful Lord. Yan yan niruktam vachasa nirupitam. Nirukta refers to the Vedic dictionary. One cannot properly understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead merely by picking up expressions from a dictionary. Yes, I'm talking about this the other day, how Daksha very carefully points out that material designations cannot be names of the worshipful Lord. And how that works is, if we look at it, in the material, on the material plane, material consciousness, material illusion, the name of something simply designates something. The actual thing that's being designated is not available just in the name alone, like water. When you say water, you don't have water. You just have the word, water. The actual water for drinking and washing and cooking and cleaning, it's over somewhere else. You're saying water, water, water. You're designating, describing something, maybe asking for something, but the word itself is not actually the water. That's why the material world is referred to as a world of names. And that's why it's an illusory place. With all the sound vibrations in the material world, they're just designations. They have no substance. So the spiritual world is different. And Krishna's names are different. Krishna is completely transcendental. What are his names? His names come from either his attributes or his form or his pastimes. Sometimes they refer to a paraphernalia, his activities. So a name of Krishna would be Yasoda Nandana, son of Mother Yasoda. So Krishna's being the child of Mother Yasoda is taking place on the spiritual platform. So when we say Yasoda Nandana, that personality is there of Krishna as the son of Mother Yasoda. But with material senses, it can't be perceived. Because the names of the Lord are absolute, they're non-different. Krishna is Krishna. Yasoda Nandana is Yasoda Nandana. How can the material mind or the material senses perceive something that's coming from the spiritual platform? It can't, unless there is the element of devotional service. That's what opens it up. And that devotional service comes through the devotees. It's the only way it can come through. And sometimes directly Krishna himself, like Krishna speaking to Arjuna, battlefield. That's not the usual case. For most of us, pretty much all of us, it comes through the devotee, the representative of Krishna, is the carrier of the devotion, is living the devotional on the devotional platform, and by contacting them, hearing from them, and serving them, offering service, we enter onto the spiritual platform of devotional service, and then can begin to understand the absolute nature of Krishna. But just by mental activities, it can't be done, because there's no substance. There's no real substance to material activities. It's all illusory. You can see it even from the words. The words simply designate something. The words themselves don't have the substance that they designate. So the mind very often thinks in terms of words, but there's no substance. It's just a world of names with no substance. Well, the spiritual world is different. Krishna is non-different from his name, Krishna. Krishna Chaitanya. And we realize this by engaging in devotional service under the guidance of a spiritual master, devotee spiritual master, Vaishnav, pure devotee. Then we can begin to understand, just by hearing is performing devotional service. We enter onto the absolute platform, the absolute plane. We're no longer active simply on the material platform where everything is a designation and there's no substance. Then we enter into the spiritual platform where everything is absolute. And everything is relishable. And everything is in connection with Krishna in devotional service, everyone and everything. It's like the sun lighting up the day. When the sun comes up, then we can see everything. So just it begins by hearing from the pure devotees. That's why we're reading these books. Srila Prabhupada is the foremost representative of Krishna. And his books, especially his commentaries and his purports, are his own personal ecstasies in love of God. So when we hear these, then we're coming in contact. We're entering into the devotional platform, coming into contact, hearing submissively and rendering service, hearing and chanting. So it begins with hearing and chanting. Continuing with Prabhupada's commentary. One cannot properly understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead merely by picking up expressions from a dictionary. In praying to the Lord, Daksha does not wish material names and forms to be the objects of his worship. That's the other thing, is the flowery words of the Vedas. People become distracted by the flowery words of the Vedas, which designate and indicate that if you do like this and you do like that, then you'll get some rewards. Daksha doesn't wish to be involved in that kind of worship. Rather, he wants to worship the Lord who existed before the creation of material dictionaries and names. He wants that Lord who is in the present moment. He's not looking for some future reward. Bhaktivinoda Thakur nice little saying. It's actually been said in many different languages. It's very profound. Bhaktivinoda expressed this, that dream not of the past, it sleeps. The future is yet to be, but be with times that are with thee, and progress ye shall call. So the Daksha wants that connection with the Lord, who is in the present moment, who is absolute in nature, and who is beyond material creation. He doesn't want some flowery words that promise something in the future. He doesn't want that. He doesn't want words that are simply designations. He wants those words and that glorification and that connection with the Lord in the present moment, in the absolute sense. This is what he's expressing that he wants. Prabhupada's explaining how Daksha is approaching the Lord like that, here and now. Prabhupada continues, as confirmed in the Vedas, yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasa saha. The name, form, attributes, and paraphernalia of the Lord cannot be ascertained through a material dictionary. However, if one reaches the transcendental platform of understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he becomes well acquainted with everything, material and spiritual. This is confirmed in another Vedic mantra, tam evam vidi vat timritum eti. If one can somehow or other, by the grace of the Lord, understand the transcendental position of the Lord, one becomes eternal. Okay. Nice. If one can somehow or other, by the grace of the Lord, understand the transcendental position of the Lord, one becomes eternal. Somehow or other, can understand somehow or other, by the grace of the Lord. In other words, the Lord's grace may come in many different ways, and you just have to be ready and open to receive it, because somehow or other it's going to come. Dealing with the Lord, there's, in one sense, there's no hard and fast rules. We don't know what he's completely independent. We have some very basic guidelines, but it is somehow or other, by the grace of the Lord, how he's going to introduce us to how we're going to get his mercy. And we can understand the transcendental position of the Lord. One becomes eternal. By being conscious or aware simply of that, without so many details of things, just to acknowledge the transcendental position of the Lord, one becomes eternal. Now, you see that with these 12-step programs. People have these horrible addictions. Drugs, alcohol, sex, overeating, gambling, oh my goodness. And it ruins their lives. They become obsessed on these things, and they lose everything. It's terrible, these addictions. Like the hamster on the hamster wheel. It goes around and around and around until he dies. But the 12-step program, the success of it, at least the big part of the success of it, is in the very beginning to acknowledge that there is a power higher than myself. And this opens up for people who are trying to get free from these addictions to receive some help, some higher grace. If there's a power higher than myself, then then I need to make a connection and become open. And then in different ways, let's say somehow or other, by the grace of the Lord, these different, they get some strength. Why? Just by recognizing there's a power higher than themselves, they get some strength. So here, Prabhupada is saying, by understanding the transcendental position of the Lord, one becomes eternal. Just by understanding that the Lord is in a transcendental position, we have access to our eternal nature. And this is further confirmed by the Lord himself in Bhagavad Gita 4.9. Janma karma chame divyam evam yo veti tattvataha takva dehan puna janma naiti mamiti sarjuna. Translation. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. End translation. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. So, just knowing, having this knowledge about the Lord, is so valuable. You get these messages of Godhead. One who knows the transcendental nature. Now this is a little deeper than just knowing there's God, there's a higher power. This is actually knowing the nature of the Lord, of his appearance and his activities. Then such a person is more than just eternal. They never take birth in the material world again, and they attain the eternal abode. So that's a little more than just knowing, yes, there's God and there's a higher power. A little more than that. Simply by understanding the Supreme Lord, one goes beyond birth, death, old age, and disease. You say, simply by understanding the Supreme Lord. Oh, it makes it sound so simple. But it is simple. What is it? Simple for the simple. Simply by understanding the Supreme Lord, one goes beyond birth, death, old age, and disease. Okay, how to get to that point of actually understanding the Supreme Lord. Sukadeva Goswami therefore advised Maharaj Parikshit in Srimad Bhagavatam 2.1.5. Tasmat Bharata Sarvatma Bhagavan Ishvaro Hari Shrotavya Kirtitavyascha Smartavyas Chetatat Bayam. Translation. O descendant of King Bharata, one who desires to be free from all miseries must hear, glorify, and also remember the personality of Godhead, who is the Super Soul, the controller, and the savior from all miseries. So, therefore, Sukadeva Goswami advises Maharaj Parikshit. See, one who understands the pastimes, activities, nature of the Supreme Lord, they never take birth in the material world again, and they attain the supreme abode. Therefore, Sukadeva Goswami is advising Maharaj Parikshit, while you desire to be free from all miseries, hear, glorify, and remember the personality of Godhead, who's the controller and the savior from all miseries. So that's how you do it. Hear and chant. How many times do we hear that? It's on every page. Text 30. The Supreme Brahman, Krishna, is the ultimate resting place and source of everything. Everything is done by him. Everything belongs to him. This is Daksha continuing. Everything's done by him. Everything belongs to him. And everything is offered to him. He is the ultimate objective, and whether acting or causing others to act, he's the ultimate doer. There are many causes, high and low, but since he's the cause of all causes, he's well known as the Supreme Brahman, who existed before all activities. He is one without a second, has no other cause. I therefore offer my respects unto him. Okay. Talking about the transcendental position of the Lord. Krishna's name in the translation doesn't appear as Krishna, but in his translation, Prabhupada has been sure to mention him by name, Krishna, just to make sure that when people hear the Supreme Brahman, they're not stuck in some impersonal realization, because that can happen. So Prabhupada's making it very clear in the translation that the Supreme Brahman, Krishna, is the ultimate resting place and source of everything. He is well known as the Supreme Brahman, who existed before all activities. One without a second, no other cause. I offer my respects unto him. So making sure here that this isn't getting sidetracked into simply Brahman realization or the impersonal realization of just the spiritual energy. To make sure, understand about Krishna, the personality of Godhead, that's who is being addressed here, and that's who we're interested in, and that's who's being glorified. Prabhupada's commentary. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is the original cause, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Aham Sarvasya Prabhava. Even this material world, which is conducted under the modes of material nature, is caused by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who therefore also has an intimate relationship with the material world. If the material world were not part of his body, the Supreme Lord, the Supreme Cause, would be incomplete. That's interesting, because we're hearing so many times in discussions how the external energy of the Lord, and the Lord really has nothing to do with the material nature, like this. So now we're hearing something a little bit, maybe get a little clarification on this. Let's see where this goes. This is interesting. If we're not a part of his body, the Supreme Lord, the Supreme Cause, would be incomplete. Therefore we hear, Vyāsadeva Savamiti Sa Mahatma Sudurlabha. If one knows that Vasudeva is the original cause of all causes, he becomes a perfect Mahatma. The Brahma Samhita 5.1 declares, Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha Anadir Adir Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam. Translation. Krishna, who is known as Govinda, is the Supreme Controller. He has an eternal, blissful, spiritual body. He's the origin of all. He has no other origin, for he is the prime cause of all causes. End translation. The Supreme Brahman, Tad Brahma, is the cause of all causes, but he has no cause. Anadir Adi Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam. Govinda, Krishna, is the original cause of all causes, but he has no cause for his appearance as Govinda. Govinda expands in multifarious forms, but nevertheless they're one. As confirmed by Madhvacharya, Ananya Sadrishabhat Eko Rupa Yade Badata. Krishna has no cause, nor any equal, and he is one because his various forms as Swamsa and Vibhinamsa are non-different from himself. Understanding Krishna's position is it's a little easier if we're off the material platform. In other words, if we're identifying with material body and senses and mind, then it's really, like we were hearing in the verses earlier, it's really not even possible to even try to. You can't. There's no way. So you have to be on the spiritual platform, which means not identifying the self with the material body and mind. And by engaging in hearing in a spirit of devotion, hearing and chanting in a spirit of devotion, then have some access to understanding a little bit more about the personality of Godhead's position, his activities and his pastimes. And eventually, by hearing more and more and engaging in service more and more, then actual love develops. And that is the actual goal of life, is to develop love for Godhead. But to even be able to understand him even a little bit, you have to be off the material platform. Be ready to hear submissively and engage in service, to hear and chant, submissive oral reception. So he has no cause for his appearance. He's the original cause of all causes. He has no cause for his appearance as Govinda. There's no cause. Nothing caused him to appear as Govinda. He expands in multifarious forms, but they're one. So we're hoping for a little more discussion about how Krishna is related to the material world, because Prabhupada introduces this whole new way of hearing about this. And go back and look at that. Even this material world, which is conducted under the modes of material nature, is caused by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who therefore also has an intimate relationship with the material world. Okay, but then, Prabhupada says, if the material world were not a part of his body, the Supreme Lord, the Supreme Cause, would be incomplete. And then the next sentence. Therefore we hear, Vyāsadeva sarvamiti samahatma sudurlabha. If one knows that Vāsudeva is the original cause of all causes, he becomes a perfect Mahatma. Okay. He's the cause of all causes. He's the cause of the material world. But that part of the of the purport there, the material world is part of his body. If it wasn't, Krishna would be incomplete. We're going to hope for some more clarification on that. That's an interesting point. We'll see. A lot of times it comes out later in the reading. Exactly what you needed to hear to clear that up. But it's going to have to wait till next time. So we ran out of time here. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare